Welcome to a story you've never heard like this before. A story that began thousands of years ago, before there were pumpkins, costumes, candy, or haunted houses. Before Halloween was even called Halloween. Back when bonfires lit the night, people wore animal skins to scare off ghosts, and they believed the spirits of the dead could walk the earth. This is not a fictional story. This is the real history of Halloween. A story filled with ancient secrets, forgotten rituals, powerful transformations, and the truth behind what we now call the spookiest night of the year. But wait. This is not just a history lesson. This is also an amazing way to improve your English. So if you are learning English, if you want to improve your listening, your vocabulary, your fluency, then this story is perfect for you, because I will speak slowly, clearly, emotionally, and explain every detail in simple English, so you can learn English in a powerful way while enjoying an epic story that will blow your mind. You will never see Halloween the same way again. Let's begin. Part 1. The origins of Halloween, before it was called Halloween. The story of Halloween begins more than 2,000 years ago. Not in America, not in Hollywood, not in supermarkets or haunted houses. It begins in a land of fog, forests, and fire. It begins in ancient Celtic lands, in what is now known as Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and parts of northern France. These ancient people were called the Celts, pronounced Celts, and they didn't have Instagram or iPhones. They had the earth, the sky, the wind, the moon, and a deep belief in nature and the spirit world. To the Celts, life was full of magic, mystery, and fear. And the most powerful day of the year was October 31st, the night of the festival called Samhain, pronounced Samhain. What was Samhain? Samhain was the Celtic New Year's Eve, the final day of the year. Because for them, the new year didn't start in January. It began in November with the dark, cold winter. So October 31st marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of the season of death. But here's the powerful part. The Celts believed that on this one night, the night of Samhain, the veil between the living and the dead disappeared. They believed the spirit world opened, and ghosts, ancestors, and dark forces could walk among the living. It was the most dangerous and most magical night of the year. Why were they so afraid? Because they believed that spirits would come back to visit their homes, bring messages from the other world, or cause harm, sickness, and trouble. So the Celts had to protect themselves, but they didn't have garlic or crosses or horror movies. They used fire, rituals, disguises, and offerings to survive the night. On Samhain night, giant sacred bonfires were lit on the hills. People believed that fire could scare away evil spirits. Everyone from the village would come together. They would bring the bones of animals and throw them into the flames. That's actually where the word bonfire comes from. Bone fire. They also believed the fire had cleansing powers. It could protect the land, the crops, the families, and prepare them for the cold, deadly winter. Now here's something really fascinating. On this night, people wore animal skins, skull masks, and dark cloaks. Not to party, but to confuse the spirits. They believed that if they dressed like ghosts or wild creatures, the real spirits would leave them alone. So the first Halloween costumes were not fun. They were for survival. The Celts also prepared special foods for Samhain, like apples, nuts, and baked goods. But not for themselves. They left them outside their homes as offerings to the spirits, hoping to make peace. They also believed in fortune-telling, that on this night you could see visions of your future, your marriage, even your death. At the center of it all were the Druids, the Celtic priests. They were like spiritual leaders, magicians, and scientists all in one. They believed they could communicate with spirits, see the future, and perform secret rituals to protect the tribe. They wore long robes, carried staffs, and were deeply respected and feared. During Samhain, they led the ceremonies, lit the fires, and made sacrifices. Sometimes animals, and in rare stories, even humans, to please the gods of nature and death. It's easy to laugh today. But for the Celts, this was real. They didn't celebrate Halloween for fun. They survived it. So far, we've seen how Samhain was the sacred Celtic festival, a night when the dead returned, the bonfires roared, and people tried to survive the spirit world. But then, everything changed, because around 43 AD, the most powerful empire in the world arrived in Celtic lands, the Romans. They were rich, advanced, and brutal. They didn't believe in Celtic gods. They brought their own gods, own rituals, own traditions, and slowly, Rome took control of the land. But here's the interesting part. The Romans didn't erase Celtic traditions completely. They didn't destroy Samhain. They merged it with their own festivals. This is where Halloween began to transform. The Romans brought two important festivals that blended with Samhain. 1. Feralia, the Roman Day of the Dead. Feralia was a day to honor the spirits of dead ancestors. People made offerings, flowers, food, wine, and asked for peace from the dead. It took place in late October, almost the same time as Samhain. So when the Romans came, they said, "Wait, you believe the dead return on this night? So do we." The two worlds began to blend. 2. Pomona, the goddess of fruits and trees. Pomona was the Roman goddess of fruit, trees, and harvests. Her symbol was the apple, which is why apples became a symbol of Halloween later. Romans celebrated Pomona around the same time as Samhain. This led to the tradition of bobbing for apples, a strange and fun Halloween game that has a very old meaning. We'll talk more about it in next part. So now we have Samhain plus Feralia plus Pomona, a fusion of Celtic fear, Roman ancestors, and fruit harvest. This mixture created something new, powerful, and strange. But it didn't stop there. By the year 300 to 400 AD, a new power was rising: the Christian Church. They wanted to spread Christianity across Europe, and they had a big problem. The Celtic and Roman traditions were still strong, especially the dark, magical pagan rituals like Samhain. The Church called these practices pagan, which means non-Christian, nature-based, spiritual, or magical. So what did they do? They didn't just cancel Samhain. They tried something smarter. They rebranded it. They changed its name, changed its meaning, changed its purpose. They took the same date, October 31st, and gave it new Christian meaning. In the 7th century, the Church created a holiday called All Saints' Day, also called All Hallows' Day, on November 1st. This was a day to honor saints and holy people, those who had lived pure, godly lives. Then they added another day right after that, All Souls' Day, on November 2nd. This was a day to pray for all souls, especially those stuck in purgatory, a place between heaven and hell, where souls waited for forgiveness. So now, the Church gave people 3 holy days: October 31st, the eve of All Hallows; November 1st, All Hallows' Day, Saints; November 2nd, All Souls' Day, These days became known as Hallowmas, a 3-day festival of the dead, the saints, and the afterlife. And that's where the name came from. All Hallows Eve, Halloween, Halloween. So Halloween is not just one day. It was part of a spiritual war between old pagan beliefs and the Christian church. But did it work? Did people forget Samhain? Not really. The church tried to control the holiday, but people didn't forget the old ways. They still lit bonfires. They still wore costumes. They still believed the dead could return. The difference? Now the holiday had two faces. One, a religious face, honoring saints and praying for souls. Two, a folk face, celebrating old traditions, spirits, and seasonal change. In many villages, the lines between religion and folklore blurred. People went to church in the morning and danced around fires at night. For hundreds of years, Halloween remained mostly in Europe. It was never really big in England because Protestants rejected Catholic superstitions like Halloween and All Saints' Day. But when Irish and Scottish immigrants came to America in the 1800s, they brought their Halloween traditions with them. Let's go back for a moment. Because before Halloween became the Halloween we know, it had some very strange, mysterious, and powerful rituals. Here are just a few real things people did between the 1500s and 1800s on Halloween night. Soul cakes, the first trick or treating. Poor people and children would go door to door singing, "A soul cake. A soul cake. Pray for a soul and I'll give you a cake." In return, they received small round cakes made with spices and raisins. This was called souling, and it was the first version of trick-or-treating. Instead of candy, they got cakes. Instead of jokes, they offered prayers for the dead. Turnip lanterns. Before pumpkins. Before Americans used pumpkins, Irish people carved faces into turnips. Yes, turnips. And placed candles inside. Turnip lanterns were meant to scare away evil spirits. The same idea as costumes and fire. Apple games. Finding love. Many Halloween games were not scary. They were about romance. In one tradition, a girl would peel an apple in one long piece and throw the peel over her shoulder. The peel was said to form the first letter of her future husband's name. In another game, a girl would stare into a mirror at midnight, holding a candle, to see the face of her future lover. But sometimes, people claimed they saw a skull instead. Halloween became a night of reading tea leaves, throwing nutshells into the fire to predict the future, hiding rings in cakes, believing that dreams on Halloween night would come true. In many ways, Halloween was a magical night of personal destiny. You've learned how Halloween survived the Roman invasion, mixed with Roman festivals like Feralia and Pomona, got transformed by the Christian Church into All Hallows Eve, gained its modern name, Halloween, spread through Europe with strange and beautiful rituals, crossed the ocean through immigrants to America, where everything would change. And now, something big is coming. Part 2. Halloween comes to America, and everything changes. Imagine this. A dark winter in Ireland. The skies are gray, the crops are dying, and thousands of families are suffering. This was the time of the Great Irish Potato Famine, one of the worst disasters in Irish history. Potatoes were the main food for poor families. But disease destroyed the potato crops, and people began to starve. Over 1 million people died, and more than 2 million Irish people left their homes. They crossed the ocean to find a better life in America, and they brought something very special with them. Halloween. When Irish immigrants arrived in New York, Boston, and other cities, they didn't forget their spirit stories, their bonfires, their ghost beliefs, or their Samhain roots. They still believed in wandering spirits, protective lanterns, costumes to confuse the dead, and fortune-telling games with apples and candles. But now, in America, those traditions began to change because the world around them was different. There were new neighbors, new cultures, new ideas, so Halloween began to transform again. Let's explore how, in the late 1800s, kids in America began doing something strange on Halloween night. They would dress up, wear creepy masks, and go door to door. But instead of asking for candy, they caused mischief. They knocked over trash cans. They stole gates. They smeared soap on windows. They filled mailboxes with flour. It was called Mischief Night, and it was becoming a huge problem. So what did the adults do? They came up with a brilliant idea. Let's give the children something fun, so they won't destroy the neighborhood. That's when trick-or-treating started to evolve. By the early 1900s, Halloween became more community-focused. Instead of letting kids run wild, cities began organizing safe activities, parades, costume contests, pumpkin carving events, and finally, going house to house for candy. It was no longer about fear and spirits. It became about fun and sweets. Candy companies saw the opportunity, and they jumped in. By the 1950s, Halloween had officially become the second biggest candy-selling holiday in America, right after Christmas. Children would walk through neighborhoods with bags or buckets saying, "Trick or treat." And most houses gave them chocolates, lollipops, gum, caramels, marshmallows, and more. Trick-or-treating became the heart of modern Halloween. Remember the turnip lanterns from Ireland? They were small, hard to carve, and kind of ugly. But in America, Irish immigrants discovered something much better. Pumpkins. Pumpkins were big, soft, round, and bright orange. They were perfect for carving faces, and they were already part of the American autumn harvest. So the jack-o'-lantern transformed from a turnip into a pumpkin. And it became one of the most iconic symbols of Halloween. This is where the name jack-o'-lantern comes from. There's an old Irish legend about a man called Stingy Jack. He was a liar, a trickster, a greedy man who cheated people, and even tricked the devil himself. One night, Jack invited the devil for a drink, but didn't want to pay. So he tricked the devil into turning into a coin. Then Jack put the coin into his pocket next to a silver cross, trapping the devil. He made a deal. If I let you go, you must never take my soul. The devil agreed. Years later, Jack died. But God wouldn't let him into heaven because of his sins. And the devil kept his promise. He didn't take Jack to hell. So Jack was stuck, wandering in darkness forever. The devil gave him only a burning coal to light his way. Jack put the coal into a hollowed-out turnip and began walking the earth. He became known as Jack of the Lantern, Jack-o'-lantern. That's why people carved scary faces into turnips and later pumpkins, to scare away Stingy Jack and other spirits. Let's go deeper into how costumes evolved. Remember, in ancient Celtic times, people wore costumes to confuse spirits, hide their identity from ghosts, protect themselves from evil. But in America, costumes became something different. At first, they were still scary. People dressed as ghosts, skeletons, witches, demons. But as Halloween became more playful, especially for children, the costumes changed. Kids started dressing up as clowns, pirates, princesses, superheroes, cartoon characters. Costumes became a way to escape reality, become someone else for a night, express imagination and joy. Today, Halloween costumes are a mix of scary, zombies, vampires, ghosts, funny, food costumes, inflatable dinosaurs, cute, baby animals, fairy tales, creative, DIY outfits, internet memes. Halloween became a costume celebration, not just of death, but of fantasy. In the 20th century, America's love for fear entertainment grew. People wanted to feel scared, but safe. That's when haunted houses became popular. Dark hallways, creepy sounds, people jumping out in masks, fake blood and spiders and smoke machines. These experiences became part of Halloween fun, especially for teens and adults. Hollywood also transformed Halloween forever. In the 1970s and 1980s, horror movies exploded. Halloween, 1978. Friday the 13th. A Nightmare on Elm Street. Scream. The Exorcist. These films made Halloween feel darker, deeper, and more psychological. Suddenly, Halloween wasn't just about kids. It became a holiday for all ages, filled with fear, excitement, costumes, candy, and creativity. Today, Halloween is a combination of Celtic spirituality, Samhain, Roman customs, Feralia and Pomona, Christian rebranding, All Saints' Day. Long ago, in Europe, a witch was not always evil. In many villages, there were women who were herbal healers, midwives, helping women give birth, spiritual guides, wise women. They knew about plants, seasons, stars, and natural healing. People trusted them, but as organized religion grew stronger, especially the church, these women were seen as a threat. They were called witches and accused of talking to the devil, casting curses, flying on brooms, eating children, not true, turning into animals, controlling weather. Fear spread like wildfire. Between the 1400s and 1700s, thousands of women, and some men, were tortured and killed in witch hunts across Europe and America. One of the most famous was the Salem witch trials in Massachusetts, USA in 1692. Here's what happened. Young girls started acting strangely, screaming, fainting, convulsing. They blamed local women, saying they were bewitched. Panic spread. The courts believed the girls. 20 people were executed, 19 hanged, 1 crushed by stones. Hundreds were jailed. The fear was so strong, evidence didn't matter. Just being accused was dangerous. This might surprise you. In old European legends, witches were said to fly through the sky on brooms during Halloween, or Walpurgisnacht, a similar night in spring. Why brooms? Because brooms were a common household tool, and they were symbolic. Witches were women of the home. Brooms represented domestic life. But when used for magic, they became rebellious and powerful. Some stories even claimed witches used potions and hallucinogenic herbs that made them feel like they were flying. And the broom became a symbol of female power and fear. Today, many Halloween decorations include black cats with glowing eyes. But in the Middle Ages, black cats were seen as companions of witches, bad omens, spies for the devil. Some believed that witches could transform into cats to escape capture. Others thought that if a black cat crossed your path, it would bring bad luck. A belief still common in many countries today. Ironically, in ancient Egypt, black cats were considered sacred and lucky. But in Europe, fear turned them into symbols of evil. Even today, animal shelters report fewer black cat adoptions around Halloween because of lingering superstitions. Why do we dress up as vampires with bloody fangs? Werewolves howling at the moon? Ghosts in white sheets? These creatures all come from old European legends, and all were connected to Halloween's original fear of death and darkness. Let's explore them one by one. Vampires, born from Eastern European stories, said to rise from the grave and drink blood to survive, associated with disease, especially tuberculosis and the plague, often feared because bodies in the ground looked undead when exhumed. In some places, people even nailed corpses into coffins or placed stones in mouths to stop them from rising. Werewolves, humans cursed to become wolves under a full moon, connected to animal instincts, rage, and transformation, believed to be punished souls or those who made deals with the devil. They represented the fear of losing control, becoming something wild and dangerous. Ghosts, souls of the dead who couldn't rest, often appeared to warn the living or finish unfinished business. Feared because they could bring sickness or death, became central to Halloween as the veil between worlds opened. These monsters help us face fear by laughing, dressing up, and playing. That's the power of Halloween. Now let's talk about some modern Halloween fears. The kind that spread in stories, news, and rumors. These are called urban legends. Stories people share, often believing they are true, but usually based on fear and exaggeration. Poisoned candy? One of the most famous urban legends. Watch your candy. Someone might put a razor blade or poison in it. Parents in America have been scared of this for decades. But here's the truth. There are almost no real cases of strangers poisoning Halloween candy. Most reports were accidents, hoaxes, or inside jobs. But the fear was powerful, and it made Halloween feel dangerous, even when it wasn't. In the 1980s and 90s, there were fears about satanic cults performing rituals on Halloween, animal sacrifices, children being kidnapped. These fears were mostly media-driven and not based on real evidence. But they added to the dark energy myth of Halloween. Let's now leave America and explore how other countries experience October 31st. Some celebrate Halloween. Others celebrate death in completely different ways. Mexico, Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, celebrated on November 1st and 2nd. Not scary. It's beautiful, colorful, spiritual. Families build altars, ofrendas with photos, candles, food, marigold flowers. They believe loved ones return to visit. People paint their faces as skulls, but with love, not fear. It's a celebration of memory, not horror. Japan, Obon Festival, in August. Not on Halloween, but similar in spirit. Families clean graves, light lanterns, and welcome spirits of ancestors. It's peaceful and respectful. Italy, Spain, France celebrate All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day. People go to cemeteries, leave flowers, more religious than playful. Germany. Some people hide knives so spirits won't hurt themselves. China. The Hungry Ghost Festival is similar, held in late summer. Philippines. Pangangalulua is similar to souling. Kids sing for prayers and treats. Part 3. Halloween becomes a global spectacle. The business, the media, and the modern obsession. Halloween was once a quiet night of bonfires and fear. Now it's a global celebration of fun, costumes, candy, and commerce. How did that happen? Let's break it down step by step, because behind the ghosts and pumpkins is a massive industry. Today, Halloween is one of the biggest commercial holidays in the world, especially in the United States. In fact, Americans spend over $12 billion every year on Halloween. That's more than what's spent on Valentine's Day. It's the number 2 biggest shopping holiday after Christmas. Where does all that money go? Let's see. Costumes, $3 to $4 billion. For kids, adults, and even pets. Yes, more than 25% of Americans buy costumes for their dogs or cats. Top costumes include kids, princess, superhero, witch, vampire, ghost. Adults, pirate, movie characters, historical icons, funny memes. Pets, pumpkins, lions, spiders, tacos, dinosaurs. Costume trends change every year based on popular movies, social media trends, viral videos, political satire. It's a mix of tradition and trend, and it fuels the fashion side of Halloween. 2. Candy, $3 billion. Over 600 million pounds of candy are bought just for Halloween. The most popular candies in the U.S., Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, M&M's, Snickers, Skittles, candy corn, a love-it-or-hate-it classic. Fun fact, Americans eat more sugar in the week of Halloween than any other time of year. 3. Decorations, $3 billion. People now decorate their homes like it's Christmas for the dead. Giant inflatable pumpkins and spiders, fake tombstones, skeletons on the roof, cobwebs on the windows, talking witches and motion-activated zombies. Homeowners now spend nearly as much on Halloween lights and displays as they do during the winter holidays. Some even compete in neighborhood scariest house awards. Haunted attractions, $500+ million. Across America and Europe, you'll find haunted houses, haunted hayrides, ghost tours, zombie escape rooms, horror theme park nights. Some of these events are small and local, but some are huge productions with actors, fog machines, sound effects, animatronics, and film-level makeup. Examples: Universal Studios Halloween Horror Nights, Knott's Scary Farm in California, the 13th Floor Haunted House chain. People pay big money to feel scared on purpose. It's the adrenaline business. 5. Pumpkin industry, $700 million. Pumpkin patches, pumpkin pies, pumpkin spice lattes. Autumn becomes a season of orange. Farmers sell millions of pumpkins, not just for eating, but for jack-o'-lantern carving, front porch decoration, fall festivals and fairs. There are even pumpkin carving competitions on TV. People spend so much on Halloween because Halloween offers something no other holiday does. No pressure to buy gifts, no religious rules, no family obligation. It's about freedom, expression, and temporary transformation. You can be someone else for a night. Dress up without judgment. Laugh at fear. Celebrate darkness with joy. Share a common thrill with strangers. It's playful rebellion, and people love it. You now know everything about Halloween, from fire to fun, from fear to freedom. But this is just the beginning of a bigger truth. Every tradition you explore makes your mind wider, your spirit deeper, and your English stronger. So whether you celebrate Halloween or not, whether you light a pumpkin or just listen in your room, know this: you are part of the story now, and stories never die. Don't forget, subscribe if this story moved you. Comment your favorite part, rewatch for listening practice, and share this with someone who still thinks Halloween is just a costume day. Thank you for listening, thank you for learning, and thank you for growing. Happy Halloween.